Pepperdine is a team that we know has struggled the last couple of years. They were 9-22 a year ago, 2-14 in league, at the bottom of the WCC. Lorenzo Romar in round 2 at Pepperdine in his 6th season there. They're one of the more confounding teams, one of the more confusing teams in the league, because we all know they have talent. We all know they have a lot of talent. Just even looking at who they lost from a year ago, in that short list that you have Max Lewis, who was an NBA draftee to the Lakers. You have Mike Mitchell, who transferred to Minnesota. You had Jan Zidek, who was a key contributor and a starter for the last couple of years with the Waves. Carson Basham, who I really liked as an up-and-comer for that team, reminded me a lot of Omar Samhan back in the day. He also leaves. And with all of that talent that left, and a lot of, like, I thought really nice talent that could have been big contributors to this team moving forward, it's not that the cupboard is bare. There is still a lot of talent on this team. Houston Millett returns, and he is one of the best scorers in the WCC. You have Javon Porter, who might very well be the best NBA prospect in the conference, returning. We saw his really breakout performance against BYU last year. Malik Moore is also going to be a huge part of what this team is able to do. Jalen Petrie is another one. Like, he's going to take another step, I think, this year. Boubacar Coulibaly, the USC transfer, big man. We know that there's size on this team. There's talent on this team. They are so confusing of a team because we know they can score, but they couldn't play defense. And that is still going to be a challenge for the squad, and how they're able to adjust going into this year without some of those bigger scorers, bigger offensive contributors. It feels like maybe that they're going to have to rely upon being by committee almost. One of the key guys coming in is Ethan Anderson from Wyoming, 6-foot guard. Key contributor for that squad, 54% from the field, 2.9 assists, 7.9 points per game, about 25 minutes per contest. Because remember, this is a team that did lose Mike Mitchell Jr., so they are going to need somebody who can fill into that point guard spot and be a distributor. That should be what Anderson can be for this team, because he's a grad transfer, and they really are going to need him to be a stabilizing factor. And it's going to need to happen fast for this team to, I think, develop before we get the conference play. Because one of the things to note about this team is they are, even if they have a pretty solid group of returners with Millett, with Porter, with Moore, Petrie, Coulibaly, they're still very young. There are 11 players who are a redshirt sophomore or younger on this team. And almost the complete opposite of what I talked about with USF and Santa Clara, where those teams brought in a ton of experience. Pepperdine is going to be relying upon a lot of youth. So there's going to be a lot of mistakes. There's going to be growing pains. For the 3rd straight year, there's going to be a lot of growing pains with this team. And can they be better on the defensive end? Can they put this all together? Can they play more cohesively? We know this is one of the biggest challenges for this team. One of the worst defensive teams in the WCC. They finished just ahead of San Diego in those metrics, and San Diego was one of the worst in the country defensively. So how is this team going to develop? How is this team going to be able to put this together? And how much of the weight of all of this is going to be put onto Houston Millett and then also Javon Porter? These two are unquestionably two of the best players in the WCC. We know that Houston Millett can can be a guy who can give you 30 in a game. We know Javon Porter can do the same. And we've seen them do it against some of the better teams in the league. Can they do it all year long? Maybe not 30 a game, obviously, but can they be consistent scorers, high-level scorers all year long? Is this team going to be able to be competitive enough to pick up wins? They did have 7 non-conference wins a year ago, but we saw it fall apart in conference, and that is where they need to be more cohesive and play with fewer mistakes. This is a Pepperdine team that just was one of the worst defensive teams in the league. They really, it's really kind of hard to actually describe just like how poor defensively they were a year ago. Because San Diego by far was the worst, but Pepperdine was right there with them. They allowed opponents to shoot nearly 50% from the field, which was second worst in the conference. They also turned the ball over the most at 13.8. So they didn't take care of the ball. They did not play good perimeter defense. They did not play good defense. And as you know, like, you don't do those two things, you're not going to win a whole lot of games. So the task for this team is to improve on the defensive end and to take care of the basketball. We talked about it last year that one of LMU's problems was taking care of the basketball. And sure enough, as they got a little bit better in that, the team succeeded more as well. So for Pepperdine, if they can take care of the basketball better, it will help them in the long run of getting through not only the non-conference, but also conference play. This is a team that loves to play high up-tempo, high-paced basketball, which, yes, that's going to lead to some turnovers. But when you're playing a lot of these teams who are so efficient, the Gonzagas, the St. Mary's, the Santa Claras, you better take care of the basketball, because they are teams that will just crush you if you don't. And there will be a few pretty good opportunities for this Pepperdine team going into the non-conference. They have UNLV. They do have a game against New Mexico on a neutral site, so that's going to be a tough challenge for Pepperdine, because again, we talked about New Mexico in the Santa Clara preview, that this is one of the best backcourts in the country. Anybody is going to have a tough time with them. St. Mary's had a tough time with them a year ago, and ended up losing that game in Moraga. And then they're at Colorado. So a few nice opportunities for them. They do have a lot of winnable games in the non-conference, which hopefully should help this team get some momentum, get some rhythm before they get to conference play. And that is where they're going to be really, really challenged. A lot of teams with a ton of experience are coming back this year in the WCC. This Pepperdine team is one of the youngest in the league, if not the youngest. They and San Diego are going to be 1-2 in that category. And experience does matter in this conference. They do have some youth that has experience. Again, Millette and Porter kind of lead that list along with Ethan Anderson. But they are going to have to translate that onto the court, and does that experience look like? Does that mean they'll take care of the ball better? Does that mean they'll play better defense? What does that better defense look like? And how are they going to be able to play better defense? Maybe Koulibaly is able to play a more significant role down low and be a little bit more of that enforcer that I think that Pepperdine has wanted to see over the last year or so. And then I think, just on a lesser note, there has to be a conversation about the status of Lorenzo Romar and whether he is on the hot seat or not for the Waves. A couple of back-to-back very subpar seasons, 10th place in both of those years. And these seasons both happen after Colby Ross and Kessler Edwards leave. And how quickly can this thing be turned around? How quickly of a process does this need to be Now, I'm not saying that the seat is hot because I don't think it is. I think that you can see that the talent is still there. They're still producing NBA players, NBA caliber players. They're recruiting NBA caliber players. But how quickly can these start to turn into wins? How quickly can this be turned around, and how quickly can the ship be righted to be a competitive team in the WCC? Because the gap between they and some of the others in the conference is starting to be very noticeable. LMU has now done it for a few consistent seasons, 2 out of the last 3. USF has now been more consistent. Santa Clara has upped their game. Portland, you can make the case, is also kind of starting to be in that category, but I need to see more from them. How quickly can Pepperdine be back in that conversation? Because over the last couple of years, they have slipped out of that. And if Romar is going to be around for the long term, I think that they need to get back to being a more competitive team in the WCC.